The podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first-time Stephen King reader. This week, we are taking on Part 4, July of 1958, Chapter 14, The Album. This chapter is 32 pages, and that is 2.94% of the book.
The adult losers reconvene at the library and are prepared to drink heavily. They begin sharing more rediscovered memories. Stan shows up with feathers but sans a body and warns them that the losers can't win. He disappears with a pop, leaving behind balloons. Mike recalls going to the Barrens for the first time and being accepted without question. Back in 1958, the losers work to build the clubhouse, while Mike tells them of his experiences with Pennywise, both as a bird and as the clown during the 4th of July parade. Mike suggests looking for Pennywise in old photos, and some of the losers spend time researching how to create a silver bullet. A week goes by, construction on the clubhouse has progressed, and Mike brings his father's collection of old photos, being very careful not to touch the pictures, thanks to Bill and Richie's reminder from Georgie's room. The losers look through the pictures. Pennywise appears in shots taken from multiple eras, and one picture begins to move. Within the photo, Pennywise climbs a lamppost and presses his face against the surface of the photo, shouting, "Try to stop me and I'll kill you all!" Then he changes into the werewolf and the leper. Stan shouts no and slams the album shut. He denies what they have seen, but the others convince him to stay with them.
Alrighty. That's definitely another one of those chapters that we've read now.
Check.
Alright, so first blush thoughts on this chapter. For me, it seemed like this is finally things coming together, clicking. We have all the children losers together, all deciding to be a group for the first time. Not this rock fight where they just stumble across each other. But I thought that was really cool to see Mike his official welcoming into the group, which I've been questioning for a long time.
I know. I was going to ask, how do you feel about it?
I like it.
No-
I feel like it was done well. It felt a lot like the other introductions did for the most part, that hey, once that character was there, everyone kind of knew it, and you don't have to say it out loud. It was just they all felt that it was there, and because there were clearly some other kids around that clearly weren't in the group, and it's just how you imagine it. You know, it's like, oh, you show up. Guess what? You've paid your initiation, and it's pretty clear why they all fit together.
23 cents.
Right, exactly.
Leaving him with a dime. So, my first note on this scene, it's interesting each decide to bring their own alcohol without any provocation or talking with one another. It's kind of, they all realize, well, I guess if this is it, I'm going out shit-faced. And, it's funny because Bill has bourbon, Bev has orange juice and vodka, Richie brings a 6-pack, Ben brings Wild Turkey, Mike has another 6-pack in his office, a Bud Light, and Eddie brings prune juice and gin. So, which one of these are you guys drinking? First of all,
do I have to pick one of those?
Yes.
Beer.
The bourbon's never going to be a bad choice. The Wild Turkey is never going to be a bad choice. The screwdrivers are always a good choice. The Bud Light, I could leave it. That's whatever. Fine. If it's there, I'm not paying for it. I'm glad somebody else brought it.
Yeah.
And I would not be against trying the prune juice and gin. I would be down to try it at least.
The only reason why I'm against it is because I hate gin.
Oh,
prune
you mix
juice,
it with anything and you can't taste it.
Well, true. But I'm just like, but yeah.
See, I'm more of a wine drinker. I would show up with probably like 3 bottles of something.
A 6-pack of wine.
I have my gallon. Good to go.
That sounds familiar to the podcast that drinks and knows things when someone shows up with a 6-pack of wine. That's happened.
Yes.
Or a gallon of wine. That's happened too.
That's happened as well.
See, I am not opposed to the drinking. That's just not those aren't my cup of alcohol. Those aren't my liquor.
Yeah. So yeah, they were just kind of interesting. Like I said, that they all decided to bring their own. I think it's kind of one of those. This could be less on the planet, so might as well ask goodbye in a fun way.
So
I thought it was more of like drowning my sorrows. Like, oh, this is terrible, and so I went and needed some liquid courage because this is so outside the realm of grown-upness. But
I think that fits.
Not to.
I think those both kind of go hand in hand a bit. Like they're similar thoughts, and maybe some of them are thinking one thing that some other ones may be thinking a different thing, and some just may being, hey, this is our reunion. Like this, we had the reunion earlier, and we all got pretty drunk, but it didn't really.
That's the after party,
and now it's that's the first night together. So let's do some drinking. Something that Benji did touch on that kind of I had a thought on as well, and it's Mike talking to himself. This chapter seemed like it jumped around a little bit as to who was really in charge of the perspective, but it seemed like it was mostly Mike, with the maybe touches here and there. But the first thing that jumped out to me in this chapter was, do I tell them that the bodies of the children were found back then and now weren't sexually molested, not even precisely mutilated, but partially eaten? Do I tell them I've got 7 miners' helmets, the kind with strong electric lights set into the front, stored back at my house, one of them for a guy named Stan Uris, who couldn't make the scene, as we used to say? Or is it maybe enough just to tell them to go home and get a good night's sleep because it ends tomorrow or tomorrow night for good, either for it or for us? So, like, why is it tomorrow? Like, specifically, where's that date coming from? That clearly Mike has an idea of. That was just one thing that was like, oh, that seems pretty clear-cut prediction by Mike that we hadn't had indication from before, as far as I know. I'm not asking you guys to spoil anything.
That was no, I don't know. I don't know why he thinks it's going to be done in 24 hours. I wonder if it's just ramped up that much that he knows now that they're here, this is just the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to figure out the passage here again, just the start of it, because
and just like the next paragraph, it basically he goes on to keep saying, tonight the job is to make the wheel. Tomorrow we can see if it still turns. So this wheel extended metaphor continues, no pun intended. But it was made a few times in a few previous chapters, but it also comes up several times in this chapter of, making sure the wheel still turns and certain things set it off and start the wheel turning and it's all clicking into place. That was kind of a common theme through this chapter, and it just seems kind of really
like the spokes of a wheel. Sorry, Luke, didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no, and that definitely makes sense. I just find it very curious as to why Mike is so convinced that tomorrow is like so special. So maybe that could be a prediction thing moving forward, but I just found that kind of curious. Melissa, what are Benj, take it away.
Oh no, sorry. I was gonna go into that. At this point, I can't remember I don't believe there is anything specific with the date. No spoilers. I'm just talking out loud here. But with it, I think it's just like Melissa said. Yeah, and you brought up once it just starts clicking, there's nothing gonna stop it. And I was trying to see if maybe this was thought of as like a past tense in the future. Mike would think that should I tell them, and that's why I'm trying to find the part in there. But I don't think it does mention that. Kind of thing. So I think it's just once the wheels are in motion, he just knows that it's time.
Yeah, Benj, what's your next note here about? You're muted. You literally just muted yourself.
I did. Sorry. So did anybody else get the feeling that, even though Pennywise takes its head as a medium, he was channeling Richie, like kind of a Richie vibe? Maybe it's just the audiobook wise, just kind of hearing Richie's voice from the audiobook reader to what what was being said and everything, but the way it was phrased, like some of the comments he made, just the very pop culture-y and goofball-ish, riddle and style stuff, it kind of felt almost Richie-ish. And then kind of goes into a later note that I have about how Richie was back in 58, or at least the first I
don't know. I didn't get that take. I do think it doesn't gel with what we know of Stan.
Yeah.
But it's not either of them. It's Pennywise being an ass. Like, I don't think it's Pennywise trying to be Stan. I think it's just Pennywise being the scariest thing he can be for them. And I don't know. I agree. It doesn't sound like the Stan that we know, but I don't know if it's necessarily full on Richie.
And I'm not saying it's full on Richie. Again, from the audiobook wise, just had a kind of a tone about him that we get a lot from, the Richie portrayal as well. So I'm just reading a bit more into it, I think, than probably me.
I can kind of see where you're coming from, because it is that silly, over the top, goofy stuff that we've seen from Pennywise, especially with Ben's walking tour into the library. It's where we start hearing the dad jokes and the super cheesy, like, oh, you got Prince Albert in a can type stuff. And again, I agree that the audiobook narrator does lean towards more a Richie style here than a yuck feel that he had in the previous one. But I don't know if it's supposed to be anything related to Richie, but I can see where you're coming from. Melissa, what did you think about Stan's head there?
Well, I'm glad Stan came.
Right, yeah. He made it, right?
Yeah, I mean, partly.
Literally, partly.
Exactly. The biggest thing that stood out to me besides like the shock value of Stan's head being in the refrigerator, which is both awesome and terrible all at the same time, it's the fact that when Stan's head leaves, the sound that it makes is the air rushing back to the spot that the head took, so that it's not just a vision of a head. An actual head was there, taking it that had matter and had space and had mass. And when it disappeared, the pop is caused by the air rushing back to fill that gap.
That vacuum of air.
Yes. Yeah. And it just shows how real Pennywise is and how he really can get anywhere, it feels like. Physically anywhere, because it's not a vision. It was matter. It was mass.
Or is that part of the vision to scare Mike even more? Like, I'm just devil's advocate. It really sells it if it has that physical property feel to it. I agree. You're probably right. But it could have just been a vision.
The balloons.
One note on the head popping, it definitely reminded me of Apparition.
Oh, yeah.
Or Apparition, and
again,
that sucking a vacuum.
Matter and mass taking up space, and then the sound of air taking the space back up.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely.
So,
and that thus concludes Science Corner.
and now we're done. That's okay. Nice chapter, folks. So, the thing with Stan's head that I kind of got out of it, which was weird, was, Richie calls from the other room and he's like, hey, did you die in there? And Mike's like, no, not really, but kind of, almost. And then he basically calls back, hey, I think you guys better come in here. And we know the balloons are still floating around, different colors, all with different sayings on them. And I thought the cliffhanger is interesting, because if you just read through it quickly, you almost forget about this part, because we never go back to it in this chapter. So I find that curious, because it seems like a lot of times you have a pretty typical storytelling device that I've seen Stephen King use a lot is come in late and early. So you start chapter 1, Georgie's chapter, is a very good example of that. You start really, really close to the end, jump back, tell the story on how you got there, and then you go to the actual end, if that makes sense. We didn't really get that here. We started at what felt like an end, but never went back. So I just found that to be kind of just a cool way to mix it up, and it makes me question, what are the others going to see when they go to Mike? So, again, more questions.
So just to through at least all of 4 so far in this, it's all been that way. It started off with, I believe, last chapter with Bill in the library talking with Mike and everything, and then it jumps back to 1958 to the rock fight. This, I believe the one before was the one before that, the interlude.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
But the same thing happened when we were introduced to them as not their first adults, but then as they were traveling back, it was like them on a train and then hit back, and somebody on a plane and then back. So that's not unusual. I think the unusual thing is we keep going back to the same scene. We're still in the library, and then it cuts off at this kind of shocking moment, and we don't know what's coming next. I think that was Luke's point.
I got you. I'm trying. Yeah, I did forget about that first part of it. So
yeah, because it is very, very similar to the time hop that you get in those chapters that you guys referenced. And I get that for sure. It's just the thing that's a little bit odd is all of those kind of end in a place that doesn't really matter. It's not like, Ben is still just passed out on the plane. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's still just like, hey, transition stuff. But like, the end of it is, I was just thinking of this thought, where this is like, it ends with Mike thinking of basically things clicking back into place memory-wise, because he didn't remember exactly what was going on, but something clicks for him here. And there's actually like a narrative thing going on with his actual person at the time, if that makes sense.
And so you're saying you'd like to know what that is, please?
Yes. I
No.
would. No, that was it. That's weird. It was the weird chapter to end the book on. I was very, very weirded out by that.
Yep.
No.
And that was the whole story. The end.
All
Good
right.
night.
Thanks. We'll see you guys for whatever we do next.
Oh, wait.
All right. So
How
we
about
ready
1958?
Yeah, let's jump back to 1958. And I apologize. I think my internet's a little bit slow, so I'm getting some delayed chit chat. So I apologize if I'm talking over anybody. Melissa, why don't you kick us off here? Do you have anything at this first portion?
Sure. So Mike joins the losers in the Barrens.
Multiple
It's plural.
barons.
Although it's not, but whatever.
Right.
And like, I know we're going to have some talking points about Mike joining the group, but really the thing that struck me in that first conversation was his experience with the clown.
Mm-hmm.
The clown was at the parade, guys. Like, he was just there
Yeah.
at the parade, chilling, hanging out.
In multiple
That's
spots.
creepy as fuck, right?
Mm-hmm. And didn't Mike mention that the second time through seeing him, that the little kids were kind of shying away, being scared, and the adults just glanced right past him?
Mm-hmm.
It's like they didn't even notice him.
So
that's messed up.
So my first thought on the Baron scene, or Mike for Barons, Richie really pisses me off here. Just obsessively, just his want to be the center of attention guy when he's in the group, because we've seen him 1-on-1, 2-on-1 with when it's Richie in normal person. I hated this kid growing up. That was always has to be the funny guy, and on top of it, coming up with some racist ass shit that, he was, using humor. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm fine with humor and stuff, but you don't know this kid, and he's part of the group, but at the same, it's just, it just really rubbed me the wrong way, and it was really kind of ticking me off, just listening to it today, on this chapter. I don't know. Most of the time I don't mind Richie and some of the stuff, but this one, that first scene with him, it got me.
I find that very entertaining because usually Richie annoys the crap out of me every time I read this book. But this read through, I'm like, oh, Richie, he's not so bad. And it didn't bother me this time. So I think it's really funny that you're taking my role.
Yeah. And most
Good luck with that.
Most of the time, I'm fine with it.
That's what I'm saying.
It's
I
just
feel like
this
we
one
switched.
Scene,
Because
yeah.
I had no problem with it because I think he was trying really hard to be his weird, twisted way of welcoming. It really wasn't but it wasn't done maliciously. So it didn't bother at all. And usually Richie bothers me. So I think it's funny that we switched.
And we have seen him do that to just about everybody and be pretty offensive towards the thing that makes them a loser. I mean, that's like specific, and yes, it is quite literally racist here. But it's also racist when he does it to, anti-Semitic when he does it to Stan. And
That's true.
I know.
when
And he does the Pancho Villa voice, and
yeah, I mean, it's all the time, and I'm not justifying it all. I just,
Calling
know.
Bill a mushmouth and haystack, and
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like, I agree with you, Benj. It's incredibly offensive, but I don't think he gets that it's offensive. And I'm not defending him to you because I actually think you're right.
you are correct.
Yes. Like, I want you to realize we agree with you.
But that does seem to be a
here's
part
the
of.
thing. Actually, I'm sorry, Luke. Go ahead.
No, go for it.
The racist part of it isn't the part that is irking me the most. I think it's the center of attention. Just shut the hell up. Kind of thing, that I think that's the one that's getting me more annoyed in just the scene. Because again, growing up, I had friends with plenty of people that were one-on-one, great guys. You could have great, deep conversations with, but you put them in front of a crowd and all of a sudden you're the butt of the joke or whoever his target is. And it's just, I don't know. It made me flash back to my own childhood.
I hadn't really made it that connection. But I know exactly that mentality that you're talking about, and it's the worst. If you're that guy, don't be that guy. Like, you're the worst. But I do think it is just kind of part of kind of as Melissa said as well, the initiation. This is the way they talk to each other, and it's kind of all accepted in the group for the most part, and it's it's just like Tyrion Lannister says, wear it as a badge so that so it's not a crutch kind of thing.
Exactly.
So he's making light of, I see the issue that you're,
yeah,
it is frustrating and he's a lot to deal with for sure. And even Bill calls him out on it. I loved when he did that. He's like, you don't need to put Ben down. It's going to be good. And Richie's like, God's sakes, Bill, I was just kidding. Sometimes you kid too much, Richie. And Richie accepted the rebuke silently. So that was one that I had highlighted, and I really liked, again, I like Bill and Richie together because I think Richie has a lot to offer, and he kind of needs Bill to rein him in a bit. And I think we had a really good example of this. And Richie respects Bill for a lot of reasons, but I also think he respects his opinion here, not just, oh, Big Bill. I think he gets that, yeah, maybe I can chill out a bit, but I don't know.
But then he cuts right back in with Bev. Oh, Bevy, I love you. Oh, we'll have a dung-shaped bungalow or a bung-shaped dungalow. Or it's just like, God, can you ever just turn off? I don't know. Like the whole scene. Yeah, Melissa, we did switch on this one.
The more you're talking, the more I'm like, God, I hate people like that. Just be quiet. And I'm a talker, but not like teacher.
So it's still in that same scene. I found it so odd. Stan just losing his crap over Eddie being told, "Oh, just suck on your aspirator. If the thing collapses in, we'll pull you out." I don't know why. I don't think it was meant to be that funny. Like, it was meant to be kind of a ha-ha, but it wasn't supposed to be fall down, slap your knee funny, and Stan taking that way. That just shows his odd sense of humor, I guess.
That, and I think there are things that kids will just crack up over that you're like, that was really dumb. So I think your adultness is showing a little bit. Because, I agree with you, but I think it's the adult perspective we have that makes it hard to necessarily get the joke sometimes.
That's fair.
But
even as somebody who doesn't.
Sorry, even in the scene, they were like, he was the only one that really laughed at it.
Right.
Yeah, and that's it's the other thing. Everybody else was like, oh, he probably grinned or chuckled. And he's, yeah.
I wonder, if that had been Eddie laughing hysterically, right? And they all that's weird that he's laughing, and Eddie was just laughing. We feel differently about it because we know adult Eddie, and adult Eddie came back. I wonder how, I asked a different way, thinking yet. Is it because Stan killed himself so early in the book that we just automatically have this disconnect from him as a person that it makes it even harder to understand him?
Well, I think, yes, because with Stan, or at least using your example, at least we would have the opportunity to maybe find out later on in the book why he found that so funny. Stan, unless we get from somebody's other's perspective, we won't know. So yes, I think you're correct in saying because we don't know Stan, we don't have his perspective. The odder things he does, we hold it against him-ish, because we will never get that resolution to why the hell was that funny? Or we have a good feeling we won't ever get that resolution to, your thoughts on that.
Yes, I completely agree. We're kind of prone to put him on a different kind of bracket because why is he different? Why was he the one that didn't come back? I think is exactly the reason. But there's also things that it seems like the author, the narrator, is doing that kind of separate him out. Like it seems like it focuses on Stan every once in a while in different ways, and Stan's character is just different at times. Where we'll talk about it later this chapter, but he just refuses to admit that some of these things are happening. He's clearly fighting it internally to believe it, which we've seen the belief in things is a huge portion of whatever the hell's going on. And so through that lens that we keep seeing, Stan's always going to stand out in certain ways. And this is just another example of the narrator even calling him out as Stan, it's an odd duck at times. So when you ready to talk about Mike actually being brought into the club here? So he walks up, right, and basically just kind of thanks everyone for helping him out, and Bill's, straightforward is like, hey, they've had it out for us for a long time, so don't worry about it. It was going to happen either way, most likely. We're glad we could help. And then they kind of have their formalities, and they talk about some luck with throwing a perfect game in a World Series, and it just kind of comes down to the flat-out invitation into the club. Is there anyone that doesn't want him in the club? No one says anything, and they basically talk about the secrets of the club and the club's mission. Benj?
Yeah, so walking in on this, first of all, I love the qualifying question from he's sitting there deep in thought, just thinking. He's like, I think that perfect game was luck or skill. It's gotta be a little bit of luck. It's like, yeah, and that's it. Just everybody's just gonna, because Mike just fits. He's clicked in, and he just fits. But then they kind of go, they're talking about the clubhouse and all that, and they're kind of using it as a euphemism for another thing that they don't want to quite say just yet until Bill says, do you want in the club? And anybody got a problem? And then they go into their stories. I think it was Beverly first, and then Beverly, Ben, Eddie, Richie, and Stan. I think that was and then Bill, I think, is the order. I could be wrong about that. But I loved how Mike puts 6 nut, could they just be, 6 white kids, picking on the black kid, making them, trying to have a go at me or whatever? Or could have just been 6 nut jobs who caught lunacy from each other? And in my experience, honestly, typically you don't catch lunacy. I know that's for a fact, but the nut jobs tend to attract each other. So it's not unheard of to find 6 nut jobs all in one spot believing the same thing. So still a fair, and valid, thought.
Like attracts like. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a comfortable place, right? Sometimes you want to go where everyone is a nut job. Just like me.
Norm!
Right.
Oh.
Melissa, any thoughts here of everyone telling their stories and Mike telling his as well?
The one thing that kind of struck me in this general vicinity was the idea that a lot of people were away. It was summer. It was vacation time. It was camp time. It was, you had sleepaway camp and rich kid camp and golf camp. And then you had the people who went away because it was dangerous. And even people who weren't planning on going away went away. But somehow these 7 kids, this perfect grouping of children, none of them went away. They were all in the here. So just them ruminating on that idea that part of their draw was that they were picked because they're here, but the fact that they were picked and so they didn't go away, I think.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it. And I don't know if we'll ever get resolution on, hey, were they all specifically picked? How long have they been being drawn together to fulfill this team? Again, the Super Voltron, where they're going to combine to make a large machine and fight fight the clown. But it seems like, again, when we just had the conversation about luck, I think maybe Bill is onto some of that kind of talk as well. It's how much of it's fate, how much is it just pure luck, or how much is it just, well, here we are, let's deal with it, and the pieces just kind of fit. I think it could be a little bit of all of them, but I really liked how hesitant Mike was to tell his story, and again, like, just everyone else is like, because he's like, you're going to think I'm crazy. And he's like, you think we're crazy? Like, no, I'm not crazy. Just tell us your story, because obviously we just told you some of the most bizarre shit. Like, and if you're believing that, like, trust us, this is a two-way street, friend. But I just liked, kind of the whole thing that they had here.
Yeah. And I do like how even after he listened to all their stories, he's like, you're going to think I'm crazy for the story I have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's like so unbelievable that, it just, even though I just listened to what you have to say, here's what I have to say too, or here's my story too. And
several of them have kind of gone through that. I mean, it takes a certain confidence and trust in those that you're with to tell your personal story, right? Even if you have already been trusted by them, it's hard for that to always be reciprocated both ways, and know that even after I say what I'm going to say, they're still going to want me around. And it's just nice for that kind of affirmation and confirmation before he even goes into it that, no. If you're going to be in this club, we're in this together. And that's part of your price of admission kind of deal.
Yeah, agreed. And, but one thought that I had, the club still doesn't know about Paul Bunyan, because Richie's still convinced at this moment that it was a dream.
Yeah, but I think that's just because Richie doesn't know. I don't think that's like a omission. I think that's
and that's what I was going with, was I believe he's just in self-denial that he hasn't put the pieces together that it actually was something real. He still, like I said, thinks it was a dream, or his scatterbrain just going into overdrive.
Yeah, and so, like, another part of that at the very end of that section was Mike kind of realizing to himself that this was the first time he'd even allowed himself to think of the bird and all of that, since basically he saw what we know to be Eddie Corcoran's murder scene, right? Mm-hmm. Down by the canal, where he sees the odd grooves and the blood all over. So I just thought that was a kind of a cool shoe-in to Eddie Corcoran again. I don't know why it is that character just sticks with me, but I think it has a big part to play in Mike's realization of what was going on when he's younger, and kind of confirmation of weird things are afoot, and it's kind of shoehorned in here again. So, any other thoughts right here?
Just remind me, is this where they talk about the calling cards? Is this the same spot, or is that the next conversation?
That's we're basically going right into it, so go ahead and take on about that.
So my only note really is Pennywise is the original Wet Bandit. Having we're the Wet Bandits, Harry. Having a calling card of the orange tufts and silver buttons or silver something on. Like the orange and silver is his calling card. So if you see something like that, then hey, more than likely this is going to be a Pennywise, or it at this point to them, messing with them, try and take them on.
And right along with that, it says Bill nodded thoughtfully. It was like some comic book villain, because they saw it that way, thought of it that way. Yes, perhaps so. It was kid stuff, but it seemed that was what this thing thrived on, kid stuff. So that kind of goes into the glamour talk that we had last chapter, where it somehow based around laughter and levity and being kids, being able to accept crazy, insane things that parents can't. And there was even more talk about that this chapter. And I know, Melissa, you've been kind of on on basically the kids' perspective and parents or grown-ups' perspective a lot. Do you have any thoughts here with this kind of confirmation?
Well, I agree with it. I think it does thrive on kid stuff. And so I'm trying to figure out how has it coexisted with the town for this long? Because as we find out later, it's been long. And as it thrives on kids, it thrives on kids stuff. I think it thrives on the kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he thrives on kids. And the best way to get to kids is to get the kids stuff. And he's a little nutty. So he does the fun, crazy supervillain kid stuff. And I think he was doing that even before there was such a thing as a supervillain. So I think that's how he lives. And then the adults kind of turn the eye and they don't notice, they don't see him because he doesn't need them to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So basically Pennywise is like the top producer at Monsters Inc. Right off the screen, haven't learned that the laughter is the way to go.
But it's kids' laughter, not adults.
Exactly. Yeah. But also going to it, where you were saying, I had something and now I'm blanking. But it's, he's been around, like we said, and the thing is, he only feeds, it's only, there's a feeding cycle, but as we learn later, he's always there, always a fixture, but he's not always killing. You're maybe here and there, but not to the degree.
Feeding.
Not exactly. He's not feeding. So with it, but like, I remember the point I was going to go with, but even back in the 1700s and so, they might have a super villain, but you've always had the monster, the creepy crawlies, the Rumpelstiltskins, the stuff under your bed. And so he just morphs to the time.
Mm-hmm.
At least it's, the way I catch it.
That's interesting. I saw your note about that, and I know it called specifically out all the years. I also didn't go back and compare them to the other big cycle times.
Yeah.
But what we had, 1927 was another one?
19, the last cycle was 27 years, ended 27 years, so it was 1930, 1931.
Yeah, because remember, the black spot was in the early 30s.
Yeah, but there was a photo from 1933, and then a photo from 1945, which was only 13.
So that's clearly off. Okay, that's
the one that caught me.
Same here.
Okay,
I started doing math back, and I'm like, wait, nope. Okay, it's not quite the 27, 28 years. 1891 doesn't fit. It's within a couple years, but it's not. It's close. Like, it might be ramping up or slowing down. I didn't do quite math on that one, but because I think it was cause in 1931, it was 1904, 1903 was the
Kitchener
Ironworks. So this was, 12 years before that.
Yeah, that's cool. I just didn't even think about it. I was like, oh, here's just more evidence throughout time. But I like that he's always there. And I like your spin on it that even though there might not be the super villain, the super big feeding time, there's always scary things around. There's always creepy crawlies. There's always, monsters in your closet idea. That's neat.
I don't like that he's always there. That freaked me out because I've read this book. I don't know how many times I caught that before, and I caught it earlier today. I was, wait, hold on. He's always there?
Yeah.
Always? But he's not supposed to be there. He's supposed to be sleeping. And I got very offended.
That kind of killed one of my theories that I'd been working on too a bit, because I've read this, a handful of times as well. And I kind of just had a theory that he just bounces. He comes back to Derry every 27 years. He'll go from Derry to, the other main city.
Castle
Rock, thank you. Go to Castle Rock, then he'll jump down to Colorado, hit up the hotel in The Shining and all that. He just bounces around every couple of years to his hot spots.
Randall Flagg.
Yeah, but nope, I was wrong on that one. So I need to read more King.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like he has a whole lot of power to do, at least the evidence that we saw. It was always a very similar type, just standard clown or just different versions of a normal person. It didn't seem like there was really any evidence to it being a monster or doing anything like that, like transformation type stuff. So I wonder if that only clicks available at the feeding time kind of stuff. I don't know. It's just I'm again first processing this here live while we're talking, but it just seemed like he was in his kind of standard Bob Gray get up at the time in each of those. And yeah, it's a one-off photo. And if we think back to technology of when some of these photos would be, you'd have to be sitting there for like 15 minutes to even get the photo to take. So,
Well, let's talk about the one that's wood carving.
yeah,
It's
That's awesome.
Why did somebody take time to carve a picture with Pennywise? Like, first of all, they had to be an adult, so they have to at least note him, put him in the thing, and that takes like it's a wood carving. Sorry,
So my
that's all I
question
got.
with
I got
no,
outraged.
that makes sense, but my question would be, do you think the person really took the time to carve him in, or did Pennywise just add that later?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
I
kind
like
of
that.
like that. Or it goes along with he is just naturally part of the town, so you wouldn't think twice about it, kind of thing. Like
Because he's always there.
he's just always there, and you wouldn't say, oh, well, there's Tim McPherson, like I'm not going to put him in. Like no, it's just Bob Gray. He's always here, and you
Oh,
don't
Tim.
or Mitch McCrasterson,
Or Tommy McCrasterson?
Oh, but a lot of really interesting things in this chapter for sure. I'm trying to think what else. Benji, you got something?
So, yeah, going back to when Mike brings the album back, before we actually even get to the album, I do a line of Richie, and this part of Richie, I don't mind. That's the thing. It was just that first instance bugged the crap out of me. But this Richie, I kind of enjoyed. He's like, I gotta take a cigarette break. And Ben's like, I thought you didn't have any cigarettes. He's like, well, I don't, but the principle still remains. I still don't see why people, when smoking was so huge, now it's more looked down upon. But back when, smoking was just common occurrence and you weren't a smoker, you know what? Go out for a fresh air break. The smokers are using that time. I used it plenty of times where it's like, hey, you know what? If you're not a smoker, go out and have 5 minutes for yourself every, hour or so, every couple hours. I'm good with it. And so like Richie holding that, sense true or holding that principle up, I'm like, all right, good on you. Sorry, just random thought that I had for that.
I thought it was just funny to me, I just look at it as him acting lazy. Like, I'm going to take a break, you guys. Because he did something later where he was like, oh, I've got a bone in my leg. He was just sitting there not working. So I took it as a real similar thing.
Oh, it absolutely was him being lazy, but I'm just saying, to most people, I just always thought it's like people would bitch about me going out for smoke breaks, and it's like, you can go outside too.
Nah, they don't let you. Only smokers get that privilege. But,
Of killing themselves slowly.
Right.
Yeah. So one thing that we kind of get into here as well, and I'm not actually seeing where it's written in the chapter, but I've got it written down, is where it kind of owns the bird now. And I think it's, Stan's the one that kind of talks about that. He's like, I think that now that you've told us all about your bird, talking to Mike, that it can turn into the bird for any of us now. It wouldn't have before, but now that we know, it knows that we know, and that kind of is all available to Pennywise's arsenal now against each of them.
Yeah. Now, don't correct me if I'm wrong. I thought he said that to Bill, and Bill was reiterating that to the group at the library.
Yeah. It was an idea that Stan had that Bill brought it to Mike, but it was Stan's thought process.
Yes. I was
You're
just
correct, though.
making sure I was, because in this instance is a switch of perspective, because we jumped to Bill's perspective.
You are correct.
And then, there was a couple of those where it jumped from Bill to Mike, and back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on Pennywise having control of that visage now?
Oh, go ahead, Melissa.
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. It's a little later on, unless, are we getting your next note as well? Jump to that, then I can.
We basically have kind of the narrator doing taking a step back from the group and talking about other things going on around them that they don't realize, and basically the body of Jimmy Cullum washes up on the shore, out of one of the drain pipes, and no one sees it, and the rest of the losers just kind of going on with their own projects.
Yeah, and my note goes into that about the Stan thing, because he says now that you mentioned it, he can appear to any one of us in the group as the bird. I think that that's not entirely true, because Jimmy Cullum was pecked to death, or the peck marks found on him, very close to where the group hangs out and around the Barrens. So it's possible that he had just taken that form around there to antagonize or to keep an eye on them. But Stan's not wrong that it's, he can appear as that. I just think now that it's been known to somebody other than just Mike, then it's a free reign for him to use it against anyone. I guess that was kind of the way I read that or interpreted that Jimmy Cullum part.
When did Jimmy die?
So what it actually says is it was the body of, well, let me guess, we go back. The previous afternoon, there had been a sudden driving thunderstorm. The clubhouse to be had not been much affected since digging operations had begun. Ben had covered the hole carefully each evening with a ragged piece of tarpaulin. Eddie had scrounged from behind Wally's spa. It smelled painty, but did the job. And the storm drains under Derry had run with violent water for 2 or 3 hours. It was that spate of water that had pushed this unpleasant baggage into the sun for the flies to find. It was the body of 9-year-old Jimmy Cullum. Except for the nose, his face was gone. There was a churned and featureless mess where it had been. This raw meat was dotted with deep black marks that perhaps only Stan Uris would have recognized for what they were. Pecks. Pecks made by a very large bird. So I don't know if we know when he actually died, but this is when he washes out.
It sounds like he's been dead a while.
It sounds like he's been dead a little while.
And so my theory would be he might have also been scared of birds. You know what I mean? I don't know if it was necessarily Mike's bird. I think it was just he may have also had a fear of birds because, some people have them.
Yeah. My thought that it's not Mike's bird is because it says, there's a bunch of peck marks from a very large bird, but Rodan was enormous. It's like the beak that it hits you once and it's just gonna obliterate you kind of thing. I don't think you could have multiple Rodan pecks on you necessarily, if that makes sense. That's gonna be a pretty devastating blow compared to a toucan. I don't know.
True. No, that's fair. It was just kind of one of those. I didn't read real deep into it. It was mostly just audiobooking chapter, so I didn't double back on a lot of stuff, and just that one caught me. So that's the reason why I brought it up.
I have a final thought on the idea of once they've shared their horrors, then the horrors belong to all of them. Right? Because that's kind of what Stan was getting at.
Right. Yep.
Once I've told you what I've seen, you can now see it too. And so I would just like to share this thought that I think they should go with in their future dealings. Are you ready? I tried to think of the most harmless thing. Something I loved from my childhood. Something that could never, ever possibly destroy Mr. Stay Puft. I feel like they need something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. That and Richie, if someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes.
But who are they going to call?
Obliviators? Or they need the I don't know.
Accidental magical reversal
the department
squad.
of I was thinking more like from the Department of Mysteries because they need people who can take out some boggarts.
The Unspeakables.
There you go. That's who they need. Who are you going to call? The Unspeakables. How? I don't know. Nobody can get a hold of them.
What do they say? I don't know. They won't say.
All right. I have 2 more thoughts about the pictures.
Go for it.
Okay. My first thought is, in one of the pictures, there's an upside-down clown, and it turns a smile into the scream. So I think that was a really eerie representation of Pennywise in one of those pictures.
Yeah. Definitely. What's standing on his head?
Yes.
And just bouncing around and being silly, clearly in the photo. And it's one of those kind of once you know a character's true intentions, you can read what you see in the picture a little bit differently. It might look completely harmless to somebody else just looking at it, but yeah, I kind of like that because they know the truth, they can kind of see that dark underbelly of the character, which is kind of cool.
And then as Pennywise attacks them, threatens to attack them, tries to attack them, but can't get through the flimsy protective plastic, whatever it's going on there. There's something freaky going on there. Mm-hmm. When Stan starts freaking out and Bill realizes that they need Stan, they need all of them. Is this the first time Bill thinks or anyone thinks that it can be scared of them? Like, chronologically, is that the first time this thought has occurred to any of them?
I mean, maybe consciously thinking, yes. Stan used calling the birds out to scare him off, and then,
Mike fought him off as Rodan. He threw rocks at him.
Yeah.
He fought back at least.
But it's that idea of Pennywise actually being afraid of the group.
And, like, looking back at the chapter 13, where they discussed the glamour stuff, they talk about the laughter and stuff like that, but I don't think they look at it as it's worried about us. It's more of a, hey, we're trying to come up with an idea of ways that we can fight back. So I think you could be right, at least, like Benji said, consciously aware that, because we have had older character references to that, correct? So, I think you might be right for, like you said, chronologically, this is kind of that realization that it is not liking what they're doing. So another thing with the album, is basically why they're talking to, I think it's Bill and Mike, and I don't remember whose perspective we were really in, but Bill was like, why does your dad like all this stuff? And Mike responds, well, I don't know for sure, but I think it's because he wasn't born here. And they kind of talk back and forth, and I thought that was a really interesting conversation that they had. And Bill's like, sure, you want to see the start of the movie. It's like coming into a movie in the middle of a movie, and he's trying to figure out where it started. And Mike says, yeah, there's a lot of history lying around in Derry. I kind of like it, and I think some of it has to do with this thing, if you want to call it that. And it very much felt like Adrian Mellon to me, with his kind of artificial or like late found love for Derry after moving there, and just being intrigued by the place. And it doesn't surprise me there's kind of a connection between Will Hanlon and Adrian Mellon for that, because those are like the two characters that we've seen that didn't grow up there but came there later, and either one decided to stay or one was guaranteed, he had planned to stay. Adrian Mellon had continued off his rent and his lease over and over again.
That's interesting. And actually, both positive and, like, Adrian was still, positive about the town itself.
Can you say that again? My internet completely crapped out. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was saying, that's actually fairly interesting because, and they both stayed fairly positive about their experiences. They were real, like, Will was a bit more realistic, but he didn't let that Derry natural anger, hatred, I don't know what it is, the water get to him, because he didn't grow up with it, I guess. And they're in the same way, but like they kept kind of a positive attitude of, we can be better, we can make this town better, and we can, like on Will, he's like, I have to, explain to my son, he's gonna be through these hard times and everything, but he can get through it and it can be better, kind of thing. So it's actually fairly interesting because if you see from the rest of the adults that we see that stayed in Derry, except for Mike, they tend to have that, blanket, blanket dickishness.
Mm-hmm.
Or
yeah, no, I'm with you. I like your point that you made that they're both still fairly optimistic about either the town or maybe kind of used in a different way. I think Will potentially thinks there's something that could be done about it.
Yeah,
and that's a big reason he's trying to, I don't know if train is the right word, but make aware Mike in educate. Yeah. So
yeah. So really quick, can we talk about Eddie in this chapter? There was a couple things that were brought up a little bit before the album and everything. It was when they were bringing back the boards and stuff. And Eddie first starts talking about the tetanus. Tetanus? What the hell's tetanus? Sounds like a woman's disease. Tetanus, you bird. He's standing up to Rich basically, and he's like, oh, I'm just messing with the Eds. Don't call me Eds. What would it be like if I call you Dick? Dick, give me that water. It's like throwing it right back at him. It's like, okay, cool. And then, something else was brought up, but, well, there's more important things that have to be done regardless of the risks, and, he's like, that's the first thing I learned not from my mother. You know, first important thing that I learned not from my mother. And so you can see he's, you know, growing and he's trying to be above himself, above what he's been trained to be. And I give him respect for that one. And I do like how he hesitated when, you know, Eddie's like, or Richie's like, hey, Eddie, did you shake it twice? Cause you know, not shaking it twice can give you cancer. And he's like, what? And he like paused for like a good, you know, 10 seconds and like, oh, whatever. Like he got hooked in, lined in, but then he was like, wait, okay, that's my neuroses kicking in and you're making fun of it. Okay, good one.
So, but then he also threw it back and he said, no, smoking cigarettes like you and Bev do, that's what really causes cancer.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and going back to my point is he's getting more assertive in his, you know, dealings, at least with Richie, and I think as a whole.
Yeah, Melissa, any thoughts on Ed's?
I really don't, because Eddie drives me crazy. He just annoys me, and I know that's mean, and I should not be annoyed by him. I should be more annoyed by Richie, but Eddie's like, ugh, I don't know. I like that he is finally growing a pair a bit, but to stand up to Richie, but for the most part,
he's just a wuss.
Yes. Like, I don't know.
It is nice to see maybe.
I tend to gloss over Eddie stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So my final two notes here. One we've kind of touched on is just the 200 years ago, and God only knows how much longer. So like, how long has this been going? Like, it's just, I mean, potentially forever, right? I mean, or however long, whatever this, I mean, what we might find out, I don't know. But, I don't know. I just liked that it just continues to get bigger and deeper and more ingrained in at least the area.
If only we had like a way of documenting 300 years and 400 years and 500 years. Like, there was no wood carvings from 1562 or whatever. So
at least that they found.
Well, that's true.
And there was no dairy in 14 something.
Right, but even with that, like, we know the settlers that all disappeared, that wasn't dairy, it was something else, basically. It was the first settlement there that completely disappeared. The Roanoke style issue.
With no
trace.
Well, and no, like, historical remembrance of it.
Right, yeah.
But everybody knows about Roanoke.
Right. Except Benji. I think we talked about that. He was like, I didn't know what that was.
Yeah. And I'm still blanking on it because I remember the conversation, but it's...
Read a history book. No.
There's check Wikipedia. It's reliable.
I'm sorry.
It's close enough.
It actually is pretty reliable.
It'll get you the basics.
So you get an overview. It'll be great. What's next?
My last note here is Stan not being able to admit that he saw. He says, I didn't want to. You know, he clearly is just refusing to accept this. And this is not the first time we've seen it. It took him a long time before he would tell his initial story with the dead boys and using the birds. And then he finally did, sure. But he always has this inherent hesitation to understand and truly believe, I think. I think that's a big part of why he didn't come back. I mean, it just seems like it's inherently, and we kind of discussed earlier this chapter, that we're already predisposed to set him in a different lens because we know he's the one that doesn't come back.
Right.
But it just seems like there's several things that keep coming up that set him apart when he's younger, too. And I just find those things interesting.
I wonder if we had read this chronologically, if you would still feel that same way about Stan if you didn't know what you know about what he does to avoid coming back. I just wonder, because I agree with you. I think to me, I'm seeing all of this going, oh, of course he's the one who killed himself because and I don't mean that in any kind of judgmental way. He really couldn't handle that idea of that unnaturalness coming back into his world because he could barely handle it as a child. But would we have really caught those moments in his childhood if we didn't know about his adulthood? And I've always wondered that.
So I will say, going in, not to get into any spoiler thing, but you guys all know on the It Chapter 1 movies, the new ones that came out, or the new one came out last year and the next one's coming out next year, they take that mindset. So we don't know, watching child Stan,
Okay, so, and I haven't seen them on purpose because I
Yeah,
wanted to
no, and that's
do this.
that's completely
But
fair.
I'm curious, people who've never read the books, what their perspective on Stan is before they
now.
get to the adult version. Right.
Yeah, no, exactly. So that's something very interesting. We'll have to try to find a non-reader, first-time watcher, maybe get their perspective. I might look into that.
Yeah, I'm sure someone's out there, and if you are, please do write into us at Floats Down here on Twitter. I would be very interested to hear that as well.
Yeah.
With that perspective, I think from what we've read about Richie, he's had some hesitations, very similar, not as abrupt or as like I refuse to. It's more just like I can't fucking believe it. Like I just can't believe it, and then he does, but he's had some hesitations and. Like Benji brought up with the Paul Bunyan thing, maybe he doesn't realize that he hasn't shared that, but he also hasn't done it. So, like, he's kind of not actively choosing to not remember that, but he isn't remembering it kind of deal. So, I think it's
and
Richie be the only one that kind of fits that for me.
Yeah, and to your point with that, Richie's like, I can't believe it. Stan is saying, I won't believe it. Mm-hmm. I will not believe this. This is irrefutably impossible. Or there's a line that is said, and I don't know if that's a book or a miniseries or something, but there's a line going back in over and over and over in my head. But it's like, it's irrefutably impossible, and it's like, well, no, it's not. And that's Stan, it's, he will not believe it compared to the others. Richie just can't believe it.
Mm-hmm. And again, for the last time, I'll bring up Eddie Corcoran this chapter. He does the same thing too, because he's running away from, or he's aggressively walking away from the monster coming out of the canal, right? And he's like, there is absolutely no way this can be real. Like he says that over and over to himself that they just cannot believe it. Again, a little bit different than refusing to believe it when all of the evidence, I mean, that was like a first experience that he just didn't get away, but I just find that kind of three different takes on a kind of similar concept. And yeah, the refusing to believe in sight of all of this direct evidence, including firsthand evidence. It kind of colors your perspective knowing that Stan is the one that doesn't come back as an adult. So sorry if you are a first time watcher and we've completely ruined that Stan dies in the next movie. So there you go.
If you're a first time watcher and you haven't read the book and you're listening to us, first of all, welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice to see you. But
if you can prove that, then I will send you a sticker or something. If you hit us up on Twitter,
we will definitely send you a sticker.
And you made it this far.
So let's go ahead and throw it to you guys for some questions for the new reader, which is me.
So mine was for the group. I kind of already touched on this at the beginning of the show, but you're facing the fight of your life, which you probably could kill you. What are you drinking the night before?
Wine. Lots of wine.
Oh, probably a bunch of stout beer. I like stouts.
Fair. I'm probably going
Reds.
tequila. Or what? Oh, red beer.
Irish Reds.
Irish Red. I'm probably going tequila. Probably tequila, orange juice, tequila margaritas.
Just tequila.
Just tequila altogether, and lime. Tequila and lime. That's.
You gonna try out Ben's trick with the whiskey and the lemon juice
right
up your nose?
No, I don't do whiskey. No.
Well, you can do it with the tequila. That's what I'm saying. Use the lime juice instead of the lemon up your nose, and then just chug. A third of the bottle.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah. It smells delicious. I think it actually not that bad. I mean, just based on the smell, I love smell lime. So, my other question, this is for you, Luke. Who uses the slug and how?
So there was kind of a confusing passage about the slug, and we didn't really talk on it. I'm going to see if I can quickly find it, because they talk about basically working on going to the library and researching it, and then it ends up with, like, they decide that they weren't going to do it, which was weird. It's like they have this idea, and Ben says, don't worry about finding the silver, I'll find it. And then, like, a couple paragraphs later, they're like, oh, but we decided not to do it, which is weird. That's what I'm trying to. I don't know if you know where the section is. So I'm on the 4th.
Look up bullet if you're kindling it. It'd be easier finding.
It's in the middle.
Ben and Richie listened to this respectfully enough. Then Richie asked, "How do you get a silver bullet, Big Bill? Send away for it? Very funny. We'll have to make it. How? I guess that's what we're at the library to find out," Ben said.
Yeah. And that's pretty much all they kind of discuss on it, but we do know that from previous chapters and early in this chapter, because Ben says at the beginning, when he's talking with adult Ben, says, "I remember what we did with what happened to my silver coin. I had 4 of them. I gave 3 of them to my friend for his kids, turned the other one to a slug."
Bueller.
I'm still looking for the sentence that...
I have to make sure you didn't freeze.
No, I'm just trying to be quiet so I don't have to edit this out later. I don't know. So, if they go ahead and make a slug, which makes me think of a shotgun, which we haven't seen them really have access to yet. Not to say that they don't or couldn't find one. I'm going to say that they don't use a shotgun. They could do like because a slug, in general, we're going to be pretty heavy, pretty solid projectile, kind of flung out of anything. So maybe like a sling, like a David and Goliath type situation, slingshot action. But who actually uses it? I feel like this is. I'm gonna go with Ben, because why not? Ben's gonna use a slingshot with the slug.
Okay. In the billiard room?
I was gonna say in the laboratory.
Excellent.
So
that's all I got.
For questions from the new reader, there was another line in here that I actually did highlight that I had a question about. And now that I've done all this sort of searching, it's going to take me a second to find it. Hang on. Okay, so it starts with, "Dig right here," Ben said, showing Mike the spot. "Go down about a foot, then I'll set a board in and hold it flush against the side while you shovel the dirt back in." "Good plan, man," Richie said sagely from where he sat on the edge of the excavation with his sneakers dangling down. "What's wrong with you?" Mike asked. Got a bone in my leg," Richie said comfortably. How's your project with Bill going?" Mike stopped long enough to strip off his shirt and then began to dig. It was hot down here, even in the barrens. Crickets hummed sleepily like summer clocks in the brush. "Well, not too bad," Richie said, and Mike thought he flashed Ben a mildly warning look, I guess. What project are we talking about here?
Well, this is a week later after Mike was in the Barrens the first time, and this was after going to the library, so I would assume the research.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It just seems weird that they're hiding that from Mike, I guess.
Mike still knew,
But he's not. It doesn't matter. Once you're in, is the whole thing.
I get that. I get the question of why you're bringing up why. Because Ben's always because Ben's the one that shot him a look, correct? That's the way it read. Ben shot Richie a look.
Other way around.
I don't know.
Other way around. Richie shoots Ben a look.
Oh, okay.
Which is why it's really weird to me, because Richie seems to be not really have the filter of like, oh, who, he's kind of like, oh, you're in for an inch, you're in for a mile. So that's why I'm confused by it.
No, that's fair. That is fairly confusing on that. I don't know.
So maybe it's reading into it too much, which we do, and that's fine. But that caught my attention. Anyway, let's get to our favorite things. Benj, what was your favorite thing?
The loser on the balloon. The losers are still losing, but Stanley Urs is finally ahead. I can't help it, but that line makes me laugh every time, even though it's like in the scariest part of the scene or the chapter, and it's like creepy and just weird and just mean. I still laugh every time.
Yeah, no, I chuckled at it. It's so stupid. It's so dumb, but I love it. I do.
That's Pennywise.
Yeah.
And that goes into the whole ritual. of you can't even chuckle at something like that.
Oh, I'd be screwed. Yeah. No doubt. I would not be good for this team. I can maybe pull Ben's part for what we've seen, but at least to this part. But, Melissa, what was your favorite thing this chapter?
Same. Stan head. I like Stan's head. I like the scare factor of Stan's head. It was just scary enough for me without being like over the top. They're going to die. That's the kind of scare I like. I thought it was funny in a super cheesy dad joke kind of way. I like the science behind the air, and I like that they're balloons. Stan head
for the win. There it is. Two for three. I'm going to go a different route, but I agree that was a great scene for sure. And like I said, I'm really curious to see what they find when they go in to see Mike.
And again, really quick, the miniseries on this one kills it. Love that in the miniseries. So good.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you.
So my favorite thing in this chapter was a line that I kind of already read earlier, but I'll go ahead and do it again real quick. But it's where Bill is talking to Richie about basically giving Ben a hard time. He says, "You don't need to put Ben down." Bill said, still looking at the sky, "It's going to be good," talking about the clubhouse. "God's sakes, Bill, I was just kidding. Sometimes you kid too much, Richie." Richie accepted the rebuke silently. I had really nothing to add that I didn't talk about earlier. I just like Bill kind of checking Richie on kind of just being like, come on, this is your friend. Like, don't be an asshole to him. Like, you can rib people, but don't be an asshole to your friend. Like, that's stupid. Like, take it easy sometimes. Take about 10% off there, Super Chief. And I think that pretty much wraps us up for this chapter. So please find us at Floats Down Here. If you are someone that fits the demographic that we mentioned earlier about having seen the first Part 1 It movie, haven't read books, haven't seen the miniseries, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know. You can find us on Twitter at Floats Down Here. You can send us an email at floatsdownhere@gmail.com. Check out this show and all of our shows at thepodcastthat.com. Subscribe, like, rate, and leave comments on iTunes and YouTube and everywhere else you can find us.
Make sure, if you do enjoy what we put out on this show and all of our other shows, hit up our Patreon account, patreon.com/stayimaginary, and join any one of Legions for different dollar amounts. That just helps keep the show going. It helps us out with some of the things. For some of the rewards, we offer monthly giveaways, thanks on episodes. We do seasonal merch stuff. You have access to unheard productions, unheard shows on the live stuff that only Patreon exclusives, as they were called. But if you can help, awesome. If you can't, just make sure you share it around so everybody else can just enjoy what we put out if you guys enjoy it.
We will see you next time for chapter number 15, The Smoke Hole.
You'll float too.
Stay imaginary.
Thanks.